Extremely delighted to introduce Dr. Chandra Vishwanathan, MD, PhD, DTM, and DPB. Dr. Vishwanathan is former head, Regenerative Medicine, Reliance Life Sciences, Mumbai, and former director, National Plasma Fractionation Center, and also former medical director, Cord Blood Banking Initiative. After completing her MD degree in pathology from University of Mumbai, she did her PhD in applied biology again from Mumbai University. Later, she did her diploma not only in pathology and bacteriology, but also in transfusion medicine. Her research interests and achievements include developing affordable blood products for patients. She has set up the first blood component way back in 1986, and also she has set up several blood banks, component laboratories, laying down quality systems, etc. She also has developed and marketed blood products. She has a large number of publications, almost 80 publications in international journals to her credit, and she has mentored 15 students in pathology and transfusion medicine for completing their MD degree. She's an excellent speaker and has been invited to present at several international conferences and forums. Her focus of research is on taking stem cells to the masses as a regular prescription medicine. She has got grit and determination to reach greater heights and puts in all her efforts to be successful in the efforts that she takes up. She has traveled through many untrodden paths. A warm welcome to you, madam. So, she has also received several awards. Today, she will enlighten us on the topic Chasing Hope Through Stem Cells. Dr. Chandra Vishwanathan, please.
Hello.
We can hear you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Susan, Dr. Rita, for that wonderful introduction. And of course, Dr. Susan has been my very good friend. So she's speaking very highly about me is not as because she's a good friend of mine. But apart from that, I must thank her for putting so many such programs in this pandemic, which I think at least I haven't done. And I'm so proud to be associated with a person like her. So much of energy, so much of enthusiasm, so much of follow-up. So I really wish we had half a dozen Susans. We would have done many, many more things too. So that's one. And I must congratulate Dr. Nair for having thought of having this kind of discussion under the SOFIA program, because this is how I think we will inculcate newer and newer understandings to children who are getting into the science forum or into the parascience or what you said, allied subjects. And as I have understood that there are going to be undergraduates and maybe a couple of postgraduates, I'll try and see not to use any of the jargons. And I'll make an honest attempt to at least convey in the next 45 minutes what the stem cell is all about, where we started, and all about the India story, because we can talk at length about the global story because time doesn't permit all that. If I have left you with some kind of enthusiasm, some kind of wanting to know more, I think I would have done today's job. In my view, I would have done it well. May I have my first slide, or shall I project the first slide, please?
Ma'am, either way it's possible.
Yeah, yeah. There I am already. So is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm not able to see my picture though. Is that okay, or?
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
You can see. Okay, I'm not able to see, so I don't know why. Because normally it comes, yeah, that's better. Because see, this is a meeting where maybe a couple of hundreds are listening, and I don't get, or any speaker doesn't get a feedback about whether they are following us or whether we are all on the same page. So at least I mean, I don't know, some going forward, some technologist will come up with something new so that we get some kind of a feedback intermittently. Having said that, just wanted to start the subject with a basic understanding. So for all of you youngsters who are listening to me today, I'm sure you would agree and understand that if there was no regeneration, there would have been no life at all. So life is all about regeneration. But if everything started regenerating at all times, regardless, with no condition, what would have happened? There would have been no death at all. And this has been so beautifully written by Richard Goss. It's not today, it has been written many, many years ago. I'm trying to expand on what he has said, and we are going to learn a little more on what is the role of stem cells. I'm going to skip this slide because Susan has taken much more than I deserved, and she has spoken enough about it. So in the introduction, at any point of time, did you ever imagine, at least maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, some of you were not born at that time, but today you can say test tube babies are not just a myth, it's a reality, which used to be a theoretical discussion 40, 50 years ago. Today we can actually, in fact, many children today are born out of test tube, what you call as in vitro fertilization. There have been a lot of treatments for genetic diseases even before birth, which was not ever imagined earlier. There are robotic surgeries happening. Why for an adult? It's also for a child which is not even born. Just as mothers and fathers at the time of when we are just about 1 or 2 years of age, they want their children to be molded into, say, a pilot or a doctor or an engineer or somebody else. They give the necessary nutrition, necessary inputs, necessary growth requirements to see that their dream of making their child a doctor or whoever else. We are going to discuss here how a stem cell has got a lot of capabilities. A stem cell is a similar such cell which is going to have potentials to form many such important functions in future. Unfortunate thing is, in today's context, with a lot of advancement, be it in the missile technology, be it in science, be it in newer drugs, etc., we still do not have drugs to treat some of the very common disorders like diabetes, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, motor neuron disease, and many more. Many of you sitting here would actually agree with me or nod your heads as I speak that at least most of us have at least 1 or 2 diabetics in our own family or in our extended families. Parkinson's has become so very common, which was not so common earlier. And what do we have today for all these disorders? All we have is a few pharmacological drugs which just control them to some extent but never cure them. We have motor neuron disease, we have children or adults or young adults who are losing their life because they are all stuck to wheelchair because they have had a spinal cord injury. Why is it we could not offer much to these people? Because there are certain peculiar behavior of certain of our cells. We are going to discuss that in the next few minutes. So we'll try, I've just launched the introduction to you, so you have understood that we are going to discuss how some of these untreated disorders could be approached. What are the different types of stem cells? And what are the perspectives in research today? And what is the status of research worldwide? And if I do have questions, time for questions, I'm sure I'll try and attempt some of those questions. And what are the problems that we have faced so far? And what are the problems we are going to face and what we have been facing so far? Therefore, I'm going to define regenerative medicine. That is, as I said in the first slide, if you recall, regeneration is all about one cell. If it is dead, a new cell is growing, right? There's a new discipline. There's a new discipline of branch or a branch of medicine like neurology, cardiology, gerontology, or pediatric science, etc. This is regenerative medicine is a special branch of science where we are going to tackle injuries and diseases, not just by using some ordinary medicines, but by specially growing tissues or specially grown tissues, which include stem cells. It's not only about stem cells, there can be other cells as well. It also will encompass laboratory-made compounds, and there could be some organs, organ-like structures. So this includes development and application of innovative medical therapies, which will therefore stop regeneration of organs, degeneration of organs, to stop further degeneration. When I say, I just want to exemplify, I want to talk a little bit about this. Degeneration is a normal course. We all age, right? At the age of 40, we look different. At 50, we have aged, we look different. At 60, we look even different. So what happens? We accept a lot of aging changes, and these are all because of certain degenerative mechanisms that are in force, like a graying of hair, or we getting glaucoma, we getting joint problems, we getting arthritis because of degeneration, the bones shrinking, the bones showing degenerative changes. All these are degenerations. So what is this new branch of science going to do? It is going to try and see whether we can stop further degeneration. Degeneration cannot be stopped. It can be partially stopped, or you can attempt to slow down that procedure, that process. We'll try and reconstruct a few tissues which have been destroyed because of certain injuries. We'll try and engineer certain constructs. For example, if I'm going to have cells, we should know how to deliver those cells to a certain organ. And we'll try and see whether there are mechanisms that can actually catalyze or accelerate some renewal, part of an organism, part of an organ, or some parts of an organ. So all this is entirely going to be defined by this branch of science, which is called as regenerative medicine. So to recap, it consists of stem cells, it consists of non-stem cells, it'll have some constructs, it'll have some reagents, it'll have some chemicals on parts of it, right? So that's what is this slide talking about. I already told you a little bit about this slide. We spoke about diabetes not having a cure. There are so many children, young adults suffering from what is called as inflammatory bowel disorders. There are people with neurological disorders. The most important chunk of it is cancer. Is there anything that you can do with cancer? Myocardial infarction, which in routine colloquial language is called as heart attacks, coming so often. Brain attacks, which is also called a stroke. So to all these, is there a way that regenerative medicine can do something? So this is a disease in which the function, a degenerative disease we defined as a disease in which the function or structure of the affected tissues or organs will progressively deteriorate over time, whether due to normal aging, normal body wear, or what we're going to talk is lifestyle disorders. So because of lifestyle, you're seeing that you, me, and many others around us have been going through some disorders. So we are going to try to see what the stem cell can do or the non-stem cells can do. So in neurology, we are going to talk about whether it is neurology or in the case of heart or the case of endocrine organs, we are going to talk a little bit about different types of cells. I'll skip this slide because I have not discussed this further. But all I want to tell you is these are all the unmet medical needs. It's a partial list. The list can be huge. And how many millions are suffering? I have lost count. That much all of you know. I don't even want to tell you because numbers are not important, because it is mind-boggling numbers. Now, therefore, what are the stem cells? These are what are called as starter cells. Life starts from there. And from this starter cell, we are going to grow an adult tissue. So stem cells are nothing but the foundation stone. They are the foundation cells for every organ, for every tissue in the human body. And these cells may be able to repair or replace damaged tissue, thereby reversing some diseases. For example, if at all you are going to talk about loss of a few cells, let me take the example of labile cells. All of us have hair on the scalp. Every day, there are hundreds of them falling per day, right? Do we sit and count them? Because we take it for granted that it will grow again tomorrow, because there is a parallel growth happening. So is the case with our skin. When we take bath every day, we scrub our skin with loofah or with your hand or with whatever scrubber that you use. How many cells are lost? Do you count? No, you don't count, because we know that God is giving us enough of those cells again and again. New cells are going to be formed. Why? Because there are stem cells at the base. I'm not going to talk to you about the structure of the skin or the scalp, but I'm not even talking to you about the structure of the skin on the body. I'm only telling you that we are bestowed with this energy, with this indefinite capacity till you die, the capacity to form new skin cells. New skin keeps coming from below. These stem cell stalks continue to support us till the last day of our lives, right? Now, these are all called labile cells. So is the case with intestinal epithelium. What is this intestinal epithelium? It means the lining of the cells that actually line our large intestine or the small intestine. Every day when you defecate, when you throw your daily waste, how much of cells are lost from your body? Do you sit and count? You don't even care, right? So there are millions of cells lost because the new cells are going to be formed. So these are all called labile cells. So we take for granted. So somebody will say, oh, that means I should have a dense hair even at the age of 80. No, those capacities gradually go down with age. That's why we don't take everything for granted. We took them for granted when we are young, when we are till 60. Slowly we start realizing that there is a little shortage of these cells. But what are permanent cells? Permanent cells are those cells which have been already formed, we thought, like for example, the liver or the brain. They're all consisting of cells which can never be regenerated. So at one time, 20, 30 years back, I used to teach and I used to think that these cells are permanent, and so it can never be formed again. Say, for example, if somebody has a liver cirrhosis, somebody has a brain stroke, where a part of the brain is dead because the blood supply was lost, because there was a clot, or because there was some other reason, or there was a tumor. A part of the brain is dead, and so you cannot even act further. You cannot move some parts of your body because those parts of the body are controlled by that part of the brain which is dead. But today, 20 years later, we realize these permanent cells are no longer permanent. Some amount of regeneration is possible because of research that we have done today. Because some of these stem cells can actually form some of these cells, which hitherto was considered never going to be reformed. Okay, so I hope you understand the concept. So the picture here is there are main stem cells. You can form all these cells from stem cells, and there is some amount of possibility of formation of these cells, which hitherto was not going to be formed at all. That is what research has contributed. Now we are going to learn what are the unlimited cells. The unlimited cells are those cells which are going to be formed from a certain source. Now I'm going to talk to you about this source, which is called as the embryos. A 3-day-old embryo. What do you understand by a 3-day-old embryo? Embryo is something that is formed after the zygote, that is when the sperm and the ova unite to form an embryo. And from that till the 3rd day, they are actually the ones which have the potential to form a baby, right? It was supposed to be forming a baby. Suppose somebody did a research with these 3-day-old embryos. It means you are going to have, you're handling a group of cells which are having unlimited potentials. What does it mean of unlimited potentials? Potentials by way of unlimited stem cell stocks you will get. And these cells which you are taking out from a 3-day embryo are called as embryonic stem cells. It is coming out from the inner cell mass of the blastula, which is like 3 to 4 day old. From these cells, you can start playing God. God is the one who actually gives you the capacity to form a newborn, right? He has given a lot of capacity to this group of cells, which is what you will handle, you will be able to work with. So some researcher is working with these unlimited cells. You can actually understand what all the unlimited potentials are all about. So I want to reiterate that unlimited stem cells are obtained with the permission of the parents, if at all they have kept a 3-day-old embryo in an infertility clinic, because as a part of their therapy, if they gave you permission to use their 3-day-old embryo, you start working with it, you can make a baby in the laboratory theoretically. You can form liver, you can form spleen, you can form bone marrow, you can form everything, right? These embryonic stem cells, which are derived from blastocyst, in a developing embryo, can form. These are the most important cells, most interesting cells for a researcher. It's another thing that not everybody gets to lay their hands on it because of a lot of ethics issues, because there are regulations that govern usage of embryos by the researcher or even by the persons who are going to apply it for regular usage. So there are a lot of ethics issues which we will talk about. Limited stem cells are found in certain organs. So as I said, some organs like the liver or the brain or the intestine or the heart, there are some cells which have limited potentials, right? For example, if at all you take a stem cell from the base of the skin, it is only going to form skin cells, right? So similarly, if you go to the base of the heart, if you take out cardiac stem cells, it has potential only to form the cardiac stem cell, the heart cells. Now we go to the next set of cells, which are called as fetal stem cells. We call it fetal stem cells when we take out these cells from a placenta or from a fetal tissues. What are fetal tissues? From a placenta, from a cord blood, or from the placental membrane, or from the amniotic fluid. All these are received by the researcher when a newborn takes life, right? When it comes into life, when a mother actually gives birth to a newborn. These are all the tissues that are available to us, right? And if you pull out stem cells, these are called as fetal. It should have been called as neonatal, but for some reason they call it fetal. It should have been called fetal if we removed it when the child was not born. But then the child is already born, but still it is called as fetal. It could be a misnomer, right? So from here, there is a potential. So there is a potential from cells coming from here. There is a potential coming from the tissues that we already have, like the liver or the brain or the spleen or all the organs. And there is a potential for those cells that are coming out from a newborn, from the embryo, which is 3 days. A baby is not yet formed, but has a potential to form a baby. I hope you are clear with this understanding. Now we are going to talk about capabilities. Okay. Now, when you talk about capabilities, totipotent or totally potent, as I said, from the 3-day fertilized egg, which is called as the embryonic stem cells, it is totally potent. It can form a baby. It's called totipotent cells. But when it is pluripotent, it is a descendant of a totipotent. It is one stage lower. It doesn't have that kind of capabilities. It can differentiate into cells from all the 3 germ layers. When I say germ layers, I mean the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. So these pluripotent cells have got capability to form all the 3 germ layers, right? So they are pluripotent, but it cannot form a newborn. It cannot form a baby, right? That's why it's only called plurally potent. Now coming to multipotent or multipotent stem cells, they can produce cells of a closely related family. When I say closely related family, I mean the example is, say, let me take the bone marrow. Bone marrow is a fluid. For those of you who don't know what a bone marrow is, bone marrow is a jelly-like fluid which is present between our bony cavities, right? It is present in us for lifetime. And it is because of the bone marrow that we form what are called as blood cells. You and me are living because our bone marrow is working through our lives, right? Now, when this bone marrow keeps functioning throughout our lives, we form what are called as blood cells, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, the platelets, and the immunological cells. If something happened to your bone marrow in adult life, like for example, if it decides to shut down, there is an aplastic anemia, what you call it, bone marrow shutdown, bone marrow has become fibrotic, or the bone marrow is occupied by a disease, whatever be the disease, then you stop forming your blood cells. So you know that these multipotent cells, the word multipotent means it can form all related to blood. So there is a restriction, further restriction. Now coming to an even more restriction, what is called as unipotent. It can form only one type of cell. Okay, so it can form only one type. Say for example, cardiac stem cell, it can form only a cardiac tissue. A bone muscle tissue, muscle stem cell can form only a muscle. So there is, depending upon how capable or how versatile you are, these potency definitions are done. I hope you have understood this. So self-renewal is the ability to go through numerous cycles. When I say that cell can renew itself, it can self-renew, I mean it can keep on multiplying, 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 multiplying. We'll see a little more about this. When I say unlimited, it cannot, it doesn't stop at all. It goes on and on and on and on. So these are all some of the words you will read if at all you specialize in this area, or if you read as a part of your curriculum, it's possible that you will come across these terminologies. So when you further on this, a symmetric cell division, on your right there's a figure, the blue circle, giving rise to two symmetrical cells as a part of its division. Now in asymmetrical, it gives rise only to one cell and a cell which is not itself. So it gives rise to one stem cell and another daughter cell. This daughter cell can form two daughter cells. Okay, two daughter cells, and these two daughter cells can form further mature final cell type. So from this, what are all the three cell types that you have seen? One stem cell can give rise to one more stem cell. This one more stem cell can give rise to one more stem cell and a daughter cell, and a daughter cell can stop giving rise to further stem cell, but it can form into mature stem cell types. So all I want to say is you have got three cell types at this end. One is a stem cell, one is a daughter cell, and then you have a mature stem cell type. So these are therefore called as the progenitors, and the mature cell types and the daughter cells. What is important here is that whenever a stem cell divides, it always keeps in reserve one more stem cell, which is what you have seen on this picture on the right side. So a stem cell is defined by, when it divides, it gives rise to one more stem cell. So that's how the stock of stem cell doesn't get depleted by and large, right? So now coming back to what is the difference between embryonic and adult stem cells. All the stem cells that we have in you and me, they're all called as adult stem cells. And whatever the cells coming out from the embryo, they're all called as the embryonic stem cells because they have huge potentials. What is the problem here? There are a lot of challenges. That's why not many people work on it. The embryonic stem cells is very good in the hands of a researcher because he can play with it. He can produce everything. So what does he do to play with it? He goes and seeks people. He goes and asks the different centers to give him embryonic stem cells. So if at all somebody can play play tricks or can be unethical by selling some of the fertilized eggs from the in vitro clinic for a fee, that means you are actually breaking your ethics. So that it is highly unethical for somebody to draw embryonic stem cells from sources which are not known, number one. And if you start making organs, or if you start actually producing a baby in the laboratory, which our regulators do not allow, so there is no reproductive cloning permitted at all. So what you need to know is that it's a huge learning procedure. You can learn from embryonic stem cells. You can learn embryology. Using your embryology knowledge, you can understand how a liver is to be formed, how a brain is to be formed, how a certain organ is to be formed. So it's good for learning, but not for application, because once you start applying it, there is a very thin line between ethics and no ethics. Somebody will say, I just did that. I just took some cells from some family without their knowledge just to learn. And somebody will start selling those cells for a big premium. And then somebody will start selling this to another mother so that she can get actually a baby without the knowledge of the parents. So there is any amount of, I'm sure there are some movies also based on this. So it is, the ethics is what is the most important thing. And therefore, and now of course there are ethics related to religion, ethics whether you can actually sell embryos at all, whether you can even keep embryos in ultra low temperatures. Some people say according to certain religions, you can't even keep those eggs inside. So we are not talking much about it. We're just moving forward. As long as I have given you some basics about it, we are going to the next slide to tell you. Therefore, embryonic stem cells is extremely versatile. It can produce 200 plus cell types. So for regenerative medicine, for learning purposes, for educational purposes, it's a very good source. And it can actually be the future source for learning and making tissues for replacement for applications, right? It's all for learning. Also, this people, there is something called embryonic stem cell line, which we can talk if at all we have time at the end of the talk, because I don't want to cut short the information I wanted to give. So now, adult stem cells. Now, the adult stem cell word is used very often whenever you take out a cell that or actually can replenish the dying cells from a bone, from a cartilage, from an epidermis, from a olfact, from the nose. Say, if you keep blowing your nose, the new cell that is coming and actually forming a nice ciliated epithelium is because you have a stalk inside you. So these are all adult stem cells. We spoke about it. And I'll just go to the next slide. These are all the different places, different sites in an adult from where you can pull out cells. Now, people in the Tata Hospital, people who have worked in Tata Hospital, or people who have had an unfortunate situation where they have known about treating a cancer patient, you also know that you can pull out stem cells from the peripheral blood. So these are all called adult stem cells coming from different tissues, the bone marrow, the skin, the endothelial cells, etc., etc. The lower picture on the right side of this exhibit is the cord blood. So cord blood tissue is also giving rise to what is called as the fetal tissue. I'm going to call it as an adult tissue, but it's got cord blood stem cell, also can form hematopoietic cells. Okay, it can form blood cells, and that is why. And besides blood cells, it can also form many other cell types, which is why there was a business option and there was also a potential to treat many diseases by storing cord blood inside in a cord blood bank. In a cord blood bank, typically what mothers and fathers do is to keep their stem cells of the newborn as soon as it is born from the umbilical cord or from the placenta or from the amniotic tissue. These stem cells can be actually stored in ultra low temperatures, and it can be used for a future requirement of the tissue of the same baby. Say, for example, a baby is born and the baby is going to be using the same stem cell should there be a bad luck for the baby. If that baby has got a malignancy or a diabetes or some other disorder when he becomes the age of 20, 30, 40 years. Say after 20, 30, 40 years of age, if at all theoretically I pull out this cord blood and take out the stem cells which have been kept preserved, these stem cells can actually form blood cells for the baby, which is very official today. It is recognized all over the world that cord blood stem cells can treat blood cancers or blood disorders. But cord blood stem cells treating other than blood disorders, not known, but research, yes, is proving it. But it has not been approved as a medicine for treating other than blood disorders. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. I'm saying that stem cells coming from our bone marrow, stem cells coming from the cord blood is a recognized therapy for treating blood disorders. But cord blood stem cells, derived stem cells for treating a liver disease or a pancreatic disease or a diabetes or a Parkinson's disease is not yet recognized as a drug yet. It is under research. That's why they feel, all of us feel, many of us feel that if you keep this cord blood, it is possible that this could be used later on when research actually unfolds, and it can be used for the same baby. Going forward, people also now feel that it is so naive and innocent that these cord blood stem cells could possibly even treat diseases of their mother, their father, and the grandfather and the sibling. So that is the basis, that is the premise on which these cord bloods are being now stored. So if somebody of you get married in the next few years, or somebody of your elder sister or brother is already married, they must have been approached by a cord blood company saying that, will you please pay us so much? I will store the cord blood of the baby which is going to be born in your family, so that this baby, if there is a bad luck if at all the child gets a malignancy, you may be able to use it. Especially a blood cell malignancy, definitely you can use it. And if it is for a diabetes, possibly you can use it because research is going on. So that's what I wanted to talk on this slide. The first bone marrow transplant was done in 1956, and embryonic stem cells we started studying from 81, and the cord blood successful transplants from a stem cell cord blood transplant happened in 1988. The first cord blood transplant boy is very happily living even today after so many years. Okay, stem cells in the brain were isolated in 1992. In 1998, the embryonic stem cells was first studied by James Thomson. So you can go on and on. Milestones have improved and improved and improved over so many years. So research has not stopped. And that's why there are so many companies which have invested in regenerative medicine applications. They want to put money into that science, and many of you youngsters may want to take up this as your career. We'll talk about it later. It's a very busy slide. All I want to tell you is, so there can be somebody who wants to study diabetes, he will work on pancreatic stem cells. Somebody wants to become somebody has an interest in studying stem cells, or somebody wants to talk about aging and balding and things like that, you will work on stem cells of the skin or on the hair follicles. Somebody wants to talk about only blood transplantation or hematopoietic transplantation, they will work on bone marrow and cord blood. So there is so much space for people to work on. It's not just a very restricted area. This I already told you, that umbilical cord, umbilical placenta, amniotic, all these, besides forming blood cells, they can also form other tissues. That is the beauty of these cells. So I am going to tell you what you can see on the right side upper area. I think I can show can I show this? I don't know whether the viewers can see it. This is from a bone marrow. It's the mesenchymal cells which actually gets converted to all these cell types. Here I am telling you that we can take out the stem cells from the bone marrow, mesenchymal stem cells. We can take out stem cells from the cord blood or from any of these, and still show you that we can form all these cell types. I repeat, we can take out mesenchymal stem cells from any of these sources, from the umbilical cord stem cells, from the cord tissue, from the placenta, and prove to you that we can form all these cell types. So it's not necessary that you should come and punch me, take out my bone marrow, where I am so many years old, and you have to take out my bone marrow and produce these cells. You can work on your own cord blood. You can work on the child's cord blood. You can work on the child's placenta and still produce the liver. You can produce adult fat. You can produce all the neuronal cells. So don't you think it's very exciting that you have lost out on an opportunity? You thought that everything is full and final and we cannot produce any more of the nerve cells because somebody is dying of stroke. You have a big option here. You can pull out cord blood, you can do some research in the bedside and still form neuronal cells as I show here. Right? All this has been shown. You're going to see it now. See here. How the bone marrow mesenchymal, suppose I take out a bone marrow, I take out mesenchymal stem cells. These mesenchymal stem cells, how do they look? They stick onto the plate. Okay, they form colonies. They look like this. They look like fibroblasts. They look like monocytic layer, right? They look all spindly, longish, thin cells, and they stick onto the plate. You can apply certain chemicals, and you can remove these mesenchymal stem cells which are stuck to the base. And what do you do with them? By using, by using certain cues, certain signals, you can convert them into what are called as, see here, I have produced them. These in my past appointment, I have shown that they have formed bones. Many researchers have shown, it's not me alone. You go to the research, you will get 100,000 publications using mesenchymal stem cells can be formed into bone, can be formed into fat. But are you asking me a question that, oh, why do you need fat? I have fat in my buttocks, I have fat in my skin, in my arms, in my abdomen. I don't need fat. Yes, don't produce fat. I'm just telling you that you can produce fat. Don't tell me, oh, what is this lady talking about? I don't want fat. We are trying to thin. We don't want fat tissues at all. Very right. You don't want. But I think you might need chondrocytes. Okay. What are chondrocytes? These are the cartilage cells. The cartilage cells, you might wear out your cartilage when you grow old. You might have an osteoarthritis, and I might be able to produce some chondrocytes for you, right? So these chondrocytes, when you produce, it may be required for you your osteoarthritis. And these are all what? These are all to tell you, I'm not just telling you a cock and bull story, and I'm actually telling you that I can show you neurons, I can show you, TH positive, that is, I'm actually showing you objectively that I can produce some kind of, brain cells or fat cells or cartilage cells or bone cells, just to show you a point, prove a point that it's possible. So coming back to cord blood storage, so if any of you have an opportunity, if it is not expensive, today it is very expensive for some of us. If you think it is not expensive, it's worth storing the cord blood for a reason. The counter argument is that when you have all organs with you, you have fat. Today, research has shown that even from fat, I can produce these cells. Even from a fat, at the base of the fat, there are fat stem cells from which I can produce neurons, from where I can produce cartilage, from where I can produce bone. So if I have missed out, if some of you, your children, your families have missed out on storing this cord blood, don't worry. No worries at all. You can take out the fat. You can still form these organs. Okay. So that's the summary the mechanism I want to tell you. Now, how do this work? How do these work? Now, let me take the example of a case so that you will understand. A person who is 25-year-old has met with a road accident, and he had a bad spinal cord injury. So the spinal cord got almost chopped off, right? It got cut. Therefore, what happened? All the nerves coming out of his spinal cord at that point of cut are lost connection with the main supply, right? Which is the spinal cord. Unless the spinal cord receives signal from the headquarters, which is the brain, and from the lower motor neuron, which is there along the spinal cord, from the different motor neurons, it has to go to the terminal neurons, which is in the muscle. The link is broken, right? So when the link is broken, it's very easy for you to say, why not we operate? Why not we cut? It is cut. Why not we suture it back? How I wish it was true. We know that neurons are permanent cells. We spoke about permanent cells, right? So we have to find a way by which new neurons can be formed so that there will be a connection between the neurons that were cut, and there has to be a link between the headquarters and to the periphery till the end. So all along the line, I need to see that the line of connection is maintained, not just anatomically, also functionally, right? I hope I'm conveying what I want to say. So if at all, theoretically, I produce some 20 million cells, neurons in my laboratory using fat or using stem cells from an embryonic stem cell or from an adult stem cells, okay, from a bone marrow. I have with me a handful of stem cells. I go and push it into the area of injury. I should be able to do it. Yes, it can happen to some extent, but not to a large extent. These stem cells can be washed out. Stem cells have to stay there for a long time and do what it needs to do. So what are all the possible ways researchers are trying to approach this problem is what we are going to. So we have put an imaginary spinal cord injury patient as our example, and we are going to talk about it, right? So these cells, I hope I have some more time. The cells are going to stay there for some time, and they will start getting established as long as
Ma'am,
they
you
are.
got time. You got time. Please carry on.
Yeah, thank you. So it goes inside and it has to establish itself and it has to settle down, right? So there is one way. So very simple way. It has established and it is trying to handshake between that neuron and this neuron this way, right? And it will initiate cascading. What is a cascade of endogenous repair? There is something called a self-repair. Many of us do have injuries, right? But there is a internal mechanism of endogenous repair, which is what God has given us. So it will try and see that, let me wedge the endogenous repair, let me accelerate the endogenous repair, and reparative mechanisms start happening. So the cascade, there is some information coming from the dead cell. It is going and telling there, hey, there is a dead cell there. And there is some chemical impulses that is coming, it is getting conveyed. And so many of us have a fall, right? Many of us have a slip. What happens? All of us don't go to the wheelchair, right? So the small mechanisms of cascading, repairing by endogenous repair comes. Then there is a little blood supply, which improves. There is something is getting small cut because you have had a little slip, you have had a fall, and then God has given us that endogenous vascularization characteristics. So these stem cells, what you give from outside, will push the revascularization and improve that. Whatever is already going to happen is going to be improved. It reduced immune attack. What does it mean? So because there is a little blood, there is a little injury, there is a little fluid, there are some immune cells that will come there because there is a blood, there is an extravasation. Blood will come and form over there. There's a little bleeding in simple language, and it will take away whatever, right? The damaged tissue. So these cells will try and see how to balance that. If there is more destruction and less of construction, we are losing. We want more of construction, less of destruction. All that is going to be attempted at that point. Tip the balance towards repair and not to scarring. What is the meaning of scarring? It forms a tough, elastic tissue, which is so difficult to be conquered by stem cells, right? So even if you put trillions of stem cells, it becomes like an elastic band. I myself don't even enter inside. So the stem cells are trying to see what can be done. Also, the stem cells don't work for every situation. Suppose somebody had fallen and injured his spinal cord 30 years ago, you can do nothing to him now. At least the present research doesn't say so. So if somebody has had an injury in the recent past, our stem cells will try and go inside like this and try and form this bond and try to remove try and improve repair and minimize, despair. Okay. So adult stem cells are like the paramedical systems of the body. They start secreting some factors. So they are going there, settling down, secreting some factors, and then they will wake up some stem cells. There are some stem cells even in the neuronal tissue in the spinal cord. It'll say, come on, wake up, there is an injury. It will stimulate them. Come on, produce some more. Probably help some new tissue formation. So all the what in this slide, I'm trying to tell you that the stem cells are going to wake up all that God has already given us, right? Adult stem cells, it starts increasing the blood flow to the dead organ and then tries to establish the vascular network. So there is so much of small network, which you and me also have not seen. God has planned it so beautifully. And these stem cells will try and trigger in a positive manner so that you can get it repaired. And what does it do? Possibly it also changes the local mechanism, the milieu, the local environment is changed. It promotes plasticity. What is the meaning of plastic? Plastic is so plastic. The word plastic we use every day, right? That means that maneuverability, that understanding that this cell can form this cell, this can form this cell. So the capability to make it this way, that understanding that so much of malleability, so much of plasticity, the capability to form more and more type of stem cells. It can even de-differentiate some stem cells. So it can go backwards in age It can go higher up in its ontogeny or in its life cycle, so that you start having some kind of earlier stem cells. So these are all the possible mechanisms, the probable mechanisms by which the stem cells work. Transdifferentiation to primitive conversion, so it becomes a primitive cell and starts forming a nerve cell at that point, and start forming a blood cell. Blood cell means what? An architecture into which the blood will start. Blood is already there. There is no deficit of blood because the blood is already bleeding. But all we want is an architecture. We want the scaffolding there. Cell fusion, most important. A dead cell will start going, a new cell will start fusing with the not dead cells. Because unless you form the fusion, the hand holding, you're going to lose out, right? So correct the defective genes. Even the normal genes which you're giving through your cells will go and correct the defective genes to a large extent. That is how the genetic repair happens. The genetic repair today, if you're talking about, is by donating healthy cells. The actual tracking, the actual fate, the actual conversion, the actual maintenance, and functional integration, all that needs to be actually documented today, which is what we are awaiting through clinical research. What are the other probable mechanisms of action? The other probable mechanisms of action is that through paracrine functional support. So it can actually secrete some of these factors like the VEGF, FGF, that is the fibroblastic growth factors, the human growth factors, the vascular endothelial growth factors. All these factors in abundant supply in the right quantities are needed for a normal vasculogenesis or a neurogenesis at that point. It secretes homing in factors. I talked to you about settling down and establishing contact. So for that, you require the stem cell factors, the IL-8, the various colony stimulating factors. So these factors today are being actually given to patients by way of as a chemical substance. These are all substances which are available as biosimilars in the market, and these biosimilar like substances are actually being secreted by the stem cells at the level of action or at the site of action. So we believe today that whatever stem cells we inject, either through direct injection or through intravenous or through intravascular, or as the case may be, depending upon the disease that you are actually handling, it is expected to secrete these factors. So if you don't secrete these factors, dumb cells the cells will not work. It decreases, therefore, inflammation. It also increases the anti-apoptotic function. Apoptosis is a natural function which continues throughout our life. But we don't want too much of eating away, right? We want some kind of a hormonal, some kind of harmony at the site of action. So therefore, it is possible. The hypothesis is that it increases DNA repair, it improves antioxidants, it increases the HGF, which helps in tissue reparative mechanisms. It also remodels. Now, how does remodeling happen? Remodeling will happen only provided there is a lot of cellularity and there is decreased collagen. If there is collagen required, we have to provide collagen. If you want a scaffold to be provided, you will provide those. So more than one mechanisms are in play when you're talking about repair. Therefore, to summarize what I said, we will repair a particular tissue, be it this injured spinal cord or an injured brain or an injured liver, through living cells. It could be from your own or from somebody. You can borrow it from somebody, which is called as allogenic cells. Extracellular matrix is to be provided. That means you will provide the infrastructure. And this, I told you about the signaling system, all the factors. So giving only cells won't work. Giving only the matrix doesn't work. Giving only the cells signaling mechanism, they have to work in unison, which is what is the definition of cellular medicine or regenerative medicine. Word about what is called as induced pluripotent. I spoke to you about a probability of a cell going back in its age, in its life cycle. It goes to a more primitive, right? Suppose you made this primitive cell in the laboratory, okay? If you made this primitive cell in the laboratory, Can you make it? Yes. If you know so much of science, you can make it. But how do you know? Because you're working with what is called as embryology. When embryology scientists know which are the factors that help you progress a cell to make a liver or a lung or an eye or a retina, I also know how to reverse it, right? So how do you reverse it? You can take an adult tissue, like say skin fibroblast. You can take whatever. And who were the first ones who were credited with doing this? It was Shinya Yamanaka in his laboratory in Kyoto, Japan. In 2006, that they started working with 4 specific genes: the MYC, the OCT4, the SOX2, the 4 important genes which are actually the ones that govern transcription factors. And these transcription factors, if you give some of the adult tissue, some of the somatic cells, they can be converted backwards into pluripotent cells. Mind you, they are converted to pluripotent and not totipotent. They're not going to form an embryo, okay? So don't worry about it. So there is no unethicalness in this. It is absolutely ethical. I'm taking my own skin tissue. I'm using these 4 genes and I'm going backwards. Okay, this research has happened. This research is happening. This research-based clinical trial also started world over. Okay, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2012 for this. So John Gurdon and Shinya Yamanaka, they were the co-recipients of this award. An excellent thing. Why is it excellent? As you can imagine, if we have lost out on storing our own cord blood and we don't have our own stem cells, there are 2 different options. I have my own fat in my abdomen, in my buttocks. I can pull it out and work backwards or forwards and make any organ of my choice. Research is very, very favorably placed. Clinical trials are on. Having said that, if I want more primitive cells, I want to use the capability of an embryonic cell, but not exploit the ethicalness of the embryonic cell. The option I have is the induced pluripotent cells, called as IPS. This IPS, therefore, can be very beautifully, mind you, my dear friends, all of you have an immense potential to work on such cells in future. You can actually do much more to the society. You can produce tons of these cells, if possible, and use it for clinical research. Finally, it will end up and treating many of us when we grow older. Who knows who will need these cells? IPS-based, therefore, cells can be very useful. What is the more important beauty of these IPS cells? I can produce it from my own body. I don't have to go and rob cells from somewhere else. I don't have to buy it from somewhere else. So I don't have this matching business, which you have to match in the case of blood transplantation, blood tissue, organ transplant. You require to match. Here I don't have to match, right? So that's the most important thing. I don't have to do any barriers. I don't have to lie to anybody. It is absolutely ethical. Using these 4 genes, how to manipulate these genes, I can go backward and then work forward for the cells of my interest. So you can have potentials are plenty. So for those of you who are having questions in your mind, what can I become? What can I do in future? If you like an IPS cell, you can become an iPSC expert. You can become an MSc expert. You can become a embryonic stem cell expert only for the love of science. You can work with some of these cytokines. You can work with collagen. You can work with scaffolds. You can work with PCR because you require a readout, right? So you require molecular genetics. You require molecular laboratory technology. So it's such a huge branch of science. You know, each of you will find a job. Each of you will carve your career forward. So what is the scope? You can enter into therapeutics. Okay, you can be a researcher if you are going to become a doctor in future, or if you don't want to be one, you can be a researcher in therapeutics. You can get into production. You can go into processing. You can become a laboratory technologist. You can be an upscale. Somebody will say, I know to produce 10 cells in the laboratory. You can master and become an upscale. I mean, you can scale it up because 1 or 2 cells are not enough. You will require trillions of these cells. How to produce trillion cells of a certain quality, of a certain character, of a certain look and feel, etc., etc. The whole world is open to you. Some of you say, no, I'm not one of those researchers. I want to bank. Keep on banking what you like. If somebody is going to pay you for your banking, why don't you bank mesenchymal stem cells from maybe from the placental blood, from the embryonic stem, from wherever you want, you can bank. You can bank embryos. Nowadays, you have seen in the newspapers, people can even bank embryos, and then you can produce a baby after the age of 40, 45 because you're busy with your career. So just a simple banking of a simple cell to a complex cell. Just as people used to bank sperms, now you can bank ova, you can bank embryos, you can do what you like. Okay. Then somebody says, I want to work in a toxicity area. So you can work with embryonic stem cells and see whether they are toxic to newly developed drugs. So the pharmaceutical industry is looking for all such options wherever you don't want to use humans, but you want to use humanoid, human-like situations, you can do that. So career path, this is only a very small list. You can work any of it or all of it or one of it. So you can become a master of any of these. So the areas are huge. So the world is open to you. So what are the great things that we have achieved? We know that stem cell is a drug. And so all that applies to drug in the regulatory parlance will apply here. There are guidelines for researchers today available by the DBT ICMR. 2 times they have done 2007 with the first guideline, 2013 second one. Now I'm told that one more revision is expected to come. The regulators are also very favorable. So if somebody wants to work on this and start using clinical trials in this country, clinical trials more than 30, 40 clinical trials have happened last 20, 21 years. Unfortunately, the number of products in the market are far and few because there are a lot of confusion. It's a new way of treating diseases, right? So what we do when we do a research using a certain type of stem cells, somebody else will come and say some other stem cells are better. Somebody will say some other way of giving it is better. So we are in a formative age. So there is nothing like which is the best. So there can be something better tomorrow, and today gets outdated. So that's how research is advancing, right? So at the end of all this, if you see in the world, what is today marketed, stem cell coming from the bone marrow, stem cell coming from the cord blood is already marketed. It has a license. You don't have to worry about using it. But apart from that, there are a lot of products for the skin which are marketed. And very recently in our country, there has been a conditional, a small limited approval has been given to a company where they will use it for a disease called Berger's disease. It's a type of vascular disease where people, have problems with blood supply to the legs, and therefore they have shown some success in that area. So it is being used for a few patients, and afterwards, if they find the data useful, it may be allowed. So the Berger's disease is present only 1 in a million, and in India, it depends upon, the incidence is not as much. Nevertheless, there is a lot of research going on for diabetes, for liver cirrhosis, people with for joint problem, that is osteoarthritis, etc. So there are a lot of challenges that we face. Like I said, if I want millions of cells, how to produce millions of cells? Now the regulators say you cannot use media which are coming from the animals, so you should be animal free because animals produce a lot of diseases. So we don't want diseases coming from the animals. So we have to have animal free media. So there are people coming out with so many newer ways of producing and transplanting the stem cell. So there will be a lot of research because like any other new industry, this industry, despite the fact that India has the first cord blood, we started the first public cord blood bank in 2000 and end of 2000 to early 2001. It's almost 21 years. And the clinical research, bedside research in stem cells, we started, at least the private sector started in 2003, 2004. There are almost 10 plus, 15 plus government organization, government support organization, a dozen private organizations working in stem cells. Yet for the amount of money and the years that have passed, we should have actually got lot of products, but the product was so peculiar. Whether it is a product was itself a definition itself was a little difficulty. So there are it is still going through those formative problems. So I'm sure by the time you people take up research or career paths in the regenerative medicine, I'm sure there'll be scope for improvement or launches. So there are a word of caution, because stem cell is likely to treat diabetes and so many other end stage diseases where we don't have treatment options today, like for example retinopathies, color blindness and whatnot. There have been a lot of countries where fly by night operators have started operating. They say, I'll give you treatment for this, I'll give you treatment for that, give me 10 lakhs, give me 5 lakhs, give me 8 lakhs. And there are people who are throwing money at these quacks. So please be very careful before you invest any money on this. I know that when our dear ones are affected, we don't count money at all. We throw money at people who are able to offer such things. But please remember that if it was so easy, what life would have been very, do you think researchers would have thought so much, or regulators would not have permitted? It has been they've been selling hope without any substantial evidences, without any objective evidences, without a sound database. They take any patient and every patient because they want to make money. That's why I want to call fly-by-night operators, and there are quacks. So don't please be carried away by online advertisements. If it is for your dear ones, please reach out to somebody, talk to them before you even invest your first rupee on this. There is a lot of potential. I'm not saying stem cells do not have potential, because I've worked on it, but be careful and be wary of such people. So to summarize, I would like to say that many more companies, many more people like you, many more youngsters should show interest in this area. It's a very creative, very innovative branch of medicine, which I want to see develop. And clinical trial is very expensive. So to give you an example, suppose somebody wants to do a safety study to show that my stem cell is just safe in human beings. Even to start a safety trial, sometimes it can cost you in the range of 3 to 4 crores, because you have to do it on 10 patients, 15 patients. So you have to invest it on animals, you have to do animal studies, you have to do a lot of laboratory objective evidences, examples of, some readouts. You have to do PCRs 100 times, you have to do analysis, you have to do ultrasound, you have to do tracking studies. Nothing is cheap. So 4, 5, 3, 4 crores at a minimum. Then the next stage, then the next stage, and then the next stage. So we want a lot of financially sound companies, or financial investment should be available. Regulatory is only a framework today. It should become a rule so that these quacks don't come and interfere with us. If quacks come, they create a bad name. There are people who say, I'll treat anything and everything, even if they don't know the names of the diseases. They say, we'll treat you. So what happens? If they don't get treated, they've lost out on money. There will be foul mouthing. People will talk ill about this branch of science, which is actually an excellent branch of science. And we need a definitive roadmap. So we are talking to regulators regularly so that we hear from them. Suppose I do a research for diabetes. If I do this, if I do that, how many years will I have a product in my hand? So that clarity is needed, right? So then we know how much money is to be invested. And then even the companies that will reimburse, that is the insurance companies, should come forward. There has to be a lot of patience. I mean, you have to wait for a long time, and we need people, volunteers, to come forward to try out our products. So beware of quacks. I have told you all I wanted to tell you in this 45 minutes, and I hope I have been able to convey without knowing what your reactions are. If there are questions, with the permission of the organizers, Dr. Nair, Dr. Rita, and everybody else, really was a pleasure talking to you, not interacting with you because I couldn't interact, but I want to interact if there is a time. Do let me know if there are questions that I can address. Thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am. There is quite a number of questions on the chat box.
Okay.
Please do, for time permits, please do take the questions.
Can I see my chat box?
Ma'am, they will read it for you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the informative session. We are grateful to you for the time and the effort you took to share your knowledge with us. And now we can begin with our question and answer session. So our first question. So our first question is, what are the obstacles that must be overcome before the potential uses of stem cells in cell therapy will be realized?
Oh, that's exactly what I spoke all this time. So before you actually have if there is a product plan, for example, let me go back and give another example. Suppose we want to treat diabetes, right? So we want what is called as beta islets, right? Islet cells. So I will produce beta islet cells from from a particular cell. Say, let me take embryonic stem cells, for example, or let's go to adult stem cells. I'm taking fat cells and I'm producing beta islets. And it will take me anywhere between 1 year to 2 years after I get an approval to work on it. I need an approval even to start my R&D, okay? R&D to prove that I have produced insulin secreting cells. So I have to show that these cells produced in the laboratory are able to secrete insulin, and for how long and how much and what is the quantum I need to quantify. After that, I have to show that it is repeatable, and I have to show a process. And after that, I have to quantify what are the reagents that I used. If I know my process very well, then I know that the process is working. Now I have to upscale it. I have to produce it in a clean room environment, which is what the regulators say. I can't just produce any cell anywhere. So it has to be a GLP certified laboratory, good that are following the good laboratory practices in a good manufacturing setup, because these cells which are now I'm going to produce, say for example, like a story I'm telling you, suppose I have produced 5 cells in my laboratory. Now I'm going to produce 5 million cells. When I produce 5 million cells, I'll produce in a GLP certified laboratory in a GMP environment with the approval of my regulators to say that I am producing these cells with your information, show them the process, and it is written in hard. I can't change the process every day. After that is done, I will say that I have produced these cells which are meeting the requirements. Then I will take another approval to try it out on animals, whether it is toxic to my animals. So I will use the appropriate small animals, whether it is the mice or the rats, and create first in normal rat, normal mice, normal guinea pigs, or whatever. I try to say that there is no toxic change in these animals. That will take me about a year or 2. After I do that, I submit the toxicity data to my regulator. Regulators say, oh, this finding is good. I think it is not toxic. Do you want to go ahead? Your company wants to go ahead with animal studies? Yes, we want to study animals. Now, next I would go to the animals and create diabetes in a suitable animal model. So how do I create an animal model? Animal models are available for sale, or I create it in a laboratory in an animal facility which has those approvals. Once they produce an animal which is diabetic, its blood sugar will be high, its insulin levels will be low, and all the other parameters are monitored. Then these cells are injected. How do you inject them? You will inject them through the tail vein or locally, as the case may be. The researcher is free to do what he wants. He will claim the route, he will claim the dose. Now he will come up with 3 doses, 1 dose, 4 doses, as the case may be. If he proves that the animal is going to improve by way of blood sugar follow-up, then he will repeat the experiments. He will see if it is statistically acceptable. He will compare with studies in the rest of the world. If it is acceptable, he will go and tell the regulators, I am doing very well. My product is really treating diabetic animals, diabetic obese animals, and these are all my data points. Then he'll say that, what do you want to do next? Will you like to try it on human beings? Yes. Then we'll try whether it is safe in human beings first. After safety, we go to efficacy. Then we will go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 clinical trial. Then we'll go to marketing. So it should actually, without exaggeration, from concept to coming to the clinical trial stage, without exaggeration, a minimum of 6 to 7 years. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is, if a person stores its cord blood stem cells but didn't intend to use this cell throughout its lifetime, so
Hmm.
what happened to this stored cord blood stem cells? Are they used for their progeny or can be donated to?
That is depending upon the program that you have opted for. It is just like life insurance, no? So if you don't use it, you should pray that you don't require it, number one. But since you have paid once, it doesn't mean that the company is going to keep looking after your cells for lifetime. You have paid means for about 15, 18 years, they'll provide you liquid nitrogen and the quality and whatnot. You have to talk to the company whether they have a policy to hand it over to somebody else. So you may have to additionally pay and tell them that anyway the cells are immortal. If it is kept under proper conditions, it will not die at all. So they have to do validation. If the company accepts, they will charge you additionally, and then you can use it to anybody. You can gift it to anybody if science is accepting it scientifically. If it is acceptable, you are the king. You are the owner, right? You can do what you like.
Hmm. Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. The next question is, stem cell has lots of research scope. Please guide us regarding combination of subject at graduation level and specialization for MSc student.
Ah, it's one more lecture matter, but in a nutshell, if you are biotechnology students, just to keep your strength in molecular biology. Keep your molecular biology very, very strong. And once you do that at the undergraduate level, there are people who have to keep statistics very strong. So because I have always found when students they come with zoology background and they do not know much of microbiology. So microbiology, biochemistry, protein chemistry, people doing this one animal studies. All these are all going to converge finally. You have to know everything of this. So I found that understanding statistics and understanding and clinical research is another branch. Some people, some of these students are really good at wanting to be bedside workers. So there is whatever choice you get, these are all the raw materials that are needed, so you can choose the subject of your choice. Yeah.
I, I am sure that the answer our participant question. Moving ahead with our next question, is it safe to use stem cell from anyone, and how does the compatibility of the stem cells are determined before using the donor stem cell going to be donated to somebody other than his or her own family member?
So that's all about immunology. That's what I said. If you're using your own cell, the immunological components don't come in play. If you're using what are called as mesenchymal stem cells, you can give it to anybody because the class 2 HLA is not present in them. So there is no problem. It will not get rejected. But if it is an embryonic stem cell, you cannot give it to somebody else. Anyway, embryonic stem cells are no question at all because you are not using it for clinical research. So you will have to make suitable, if somebody has to give you a cell which is to another person, unconnected person, you have to be careful that there could be a rejection, especially if it is say cord blood stem cells for hematopoietic. You will have to give immunosuppression. Doctors will have to treat that part. But if you are using only mesenchymal stem cells, there is no class 2 antigen, so you don't have to worry about it. So it is all done by the doctor, so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is, are there other uses of stem cell beside using them to treat disease?
Yeah, treatment disease itself is a very big thing. It's not some small thing. It can be used as a vehicle. Suppose you're using a gene and you want to transplant or give a gene, you can deliver a gene through these stem cells sometimes, because the way you're just putting stem cells in a particular place or through intravenous or through intra-arterial, if there is no better way to actually transport a gene, you may be able to use that also as a transport mechanism.
Thank you, ma'am. So our next question is, could stem cell therapy provide a permanent cure towards a certain disease?
I'm not very sure of that answer because there is, when it comes to cord blood stem cells, it is actually reasonably permanent. You can actually be cured to the extent that you can be transplanted and you will not have your disease, your blood disease. But when it comes to non-hematopoietic or non-blood forming cells, we don't even know which patient is being treated for how long and whether they came back, because we are still early in the research program. So very difficult for me to tell you that once I give stem cells today and diabetes got treated for 1 week, whether I should give the next dose now or whether it is forever it is treated. I have no clear answer because only a forward research will tell us.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is, autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and hence wouldn't it be possible to consider stem cell therapy as one of the potential therapies treatments option?
The answer to this is a little devious because there are many clinics which claim that autism is improved, because we don't know what is the actual problem in autism. So only when you know what is wrong, you can correct the wrong, right? So here there are a lot of postulations about what could be wrong. So people have been trying, they say that definitely giving stem cells has improved certain behavioral changes. They have given rise to certain milestone changes. Like for example, simple things like a child would never laugh or smile or never want to enjoy music or something. So this child after stem cell therapy has started opening his eyes and talking or looking eye to eye with his older sibling and enjoying music little bit. Is little better. He wants to go out and sit for some time. And then again after 6 months they say that he was better, but now I think we have come back for one more. So we don't know whether it treated, but at least whatever publications I know and whatever the people who are working in this area, they seem to be reporting this kind of thing. But if it was a cure, I would have been so happy. It's not the case.
Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. The next question is, can blood cancer be cured?
Yeah, that's what I said. It is not the blood cancer that is cured. It is the bone marrow that gets destroyed because of blood cancer. So the bone marrow can be reconstituted using stem cells, cord blood stem cells.
Thank you, ma'am. So what are the challenges faced with respect to stem cell therapy to treat neurodegenerative disorder?
The same thing. So first of all, you have to do your research and you have to wait for that many years. You require a lot of money, lot of models, lot of multiple ways of approaching a problem. It cannot be just one straight-jacketed problem, you know. While you are working with neurons, somebody may say, let me try more specific neurons. See, neurons are of 100 type. Brain is the most complex organ, right? So if you're trying to work on a brain or whatever be the disease, so you have to have multiple options. I just told you 5 minutes ago about diabetes. If you want to come out with a treatment for diabetes, how you go milestone wise or stage wise, how do you progress to patients? So similarly, in the case of maybe the brain or whatever be the disease, it's not just one approach. I will adopt 5 or 6 approaches. So if at all we have an adaptive approach, if somebody regulator is going to give us a very flexible approach, I want to try 2 cells, 2 combinations. I want to try 2 cells and 1 scaffold and see whether the cells are sitting there. I want to see three ways of giving it. Sometimes in one case, I want to give it through the nose. In one case, I want to give it through the vein. In one case, I want to give it through the artery. So will you allow me? So if the regulator gives you approval, you will try all that. So these are all challenges. There is no straight. In the case of pharmaceutical, traditional medicine, there are only very few things. Either you give it by mouth or you will give it intramuscular or through. And all you want to see is that the drug has to reach the blood. Here, it cannot just reach only the blood. it might just go to the lungs and sit there. It has to go to the spinal cord, or it has to go to the brain, or it has to go to the kidney, or it has to go to whichever other organ you want it to go to, right? Or the joints. So the challenges are much, much more than routine pharma drug development.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is, how long can stem cell be stored and they are active? How many cord cell banks are there in India?
Okay, so cord blood stem cells are immortal. So you might remember, it doesn't die. If you keep it, it's like a cell line. You keep it inside in liquid nitrogen forever till you don't take it out. It is always there. When you start propagating it, you will still produce some stem cells. You can keep back the stem cells, and you can start working on another set. I showed you a slide where one stem cells divides. It gives rise to one more stem cells and one daughter cell, right? So you can still work on it, you can still keep back those stem cells. So basically, it is immortal. It's up to how nicely you want to keep it. Okay, so that is one. The other question is about there are about 3 or 4 public cord blood banks today. Public means anybody can donate there, and then it will be given to somebody else anywhere in the country, or depending on what is the level of licensing they have, they can give it to they can give it to somebody else in the world or in the rest of the world. But as far as private banking is concerned, when I say private, just to store our own cord blood, there are more than a dozen cord blood banks in the country. And so they all charge, some of them charge huge amounts, some of them less huge amounts, smaller amounts. So those are all working today. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is, do you think that experiments in trying to convert mature cells into totipotent cells for research purpose is justifiable or ethically wrong?
I told you it is not at all wrong. It's not ethically wrong at all. It's very much doable. You have to decide on what is the mechanism of pushing them backwards. That's all you need to do. You don't have to worry about it at all. If researchers are able to invest time and find a method by which it can be actually researched in the laboratory, it's a very great scope. There's a very great scope to it.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, our last question for the day is, what are the measures that can be taken to make stem cell therapy more inexpensive and accessible to the general public?
Let the stem cells get approval, start getting approval. And once a market approval comes from the regulator for a certain disease, then comes like how it can be made accessible. If it is really useful, if it is really good and cost is the only thing, there can always be methods of how a patient can be subsidized, that there will be a way by which you can produce your own media company, you can have your own reagents, you can make your own reagents. So the cost is all going in reagents, in liquid nitrogen, in creating large storage containers, in air conditioning, in buying different kits for doing PCR or molecular probes, and doing all the investigation. So all that, if at all somebody does locally and tries to come up with innovative mechanisms to decrease the costing of a product, and if government comes in, there is no reason for why anybody should worry. But there has to be a good product, first of all.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering all of our questions. I would now request Shri ma'am to take over for the vote of thanks.
This was actually our 11th year of organizing, and celebrating the National Science Day. So actually, it started with Dr. Medha Rajapaksa, who was the head of our department when I joined. And when we decided, or ma'am rather said, that we should discuss and talk science. All the labs should know what we are doing. So hence came the poster presentation. And then, of course, we invited the specialists so that they can talk about science and students can get more curious and they can think about science. So on this occasion, that is the 11th year of celebrating Quest Wider Than the Sky. That's the name that we have given for our National Science Day celebration. This time we have celebrated over 2 days. The first session was on Saturday, and the second session, as you know, that is ending today. So let me express our heartfelt gratitude to our speaker of the day, Dr. Chandra Vishwanathan. Thank you so much, ma'am, for spending time with us. And of course, telling us about this magic known as stem cells. Of course, she told us very clearly that stem cells do time travel. Ma'am told us about the properties, the possibilities, the promises that the stem cells hold, but all with a firmly telling us what is ethics that is involved in it. I'm sure students, this has increased your curiosity. You will think more and probably you will do more science in the lab, present or in future in labs world over. We sincerely thank our principal, Dr. Sister Ananta Amrit Mahal, who supported us through all these years in all this venture. We acknowledge the support from IPSA office bearers, Dr. Susan Easton, who was there at every step, reminding us, following us up, seeing to it that everything goes very well in this today, or in this celebration, or in this event. I would also thank Dr. Rita Mukhopadhyay for coming over and explaining to us all about IPSA, and not to forget the fund giver, that is BRNS BAE, who made this happen today. And we sincerely thank all our participants who are present here to make this event a happening one, and to all the faculty members who have supported us all through years. Hope in the years to come, the support will be there. Thank you, one and all. Thank you so much.